You heard it before you saw it, a faint tinkling melody drifting through the open window on a summer afternoon, growing slowly louder, and something in your chest responded before your brain even caught up. You were off the porch and running toward the curb before your mother finished saying yes. You had a dime in your hand, maybe two. The white truck rounded the corner, moving slowly, almost patiently, as if it knew you were coming. You stood there in the grass, barefoot, squinting up at the menu painted on the side, trying to decide between the creamsicle and the drumstick. And for that one moment, nothing else in the world existed. That was the ice cream truck, and for several decades, it was one of the most reliable small pleasures of American childhood. It still exists in some places, of course. You might still hear that melody drifting through a neighborhood on a hot July evening, but the ice cream truck as a true institution, as a daily summer presence woven into the rhythm of everyday life, has largely faded. What remains is a shadow of what it once was. To understand what changed, you have to go back to when it was something else entirely. The story begins not in the post-war suburbs, but earlier, back in the late 1920s and into the Depression years, when the first motorized vendors began appearing on American streets. Before the truck, there were carts, horse-drawn, hand-pushed, rung by bells. Street vendors selling shaved ice and flavored syrups had worked American cities for generations, but the invention of dry ice and affordable refrigeration changed everything. Suddenly, it was possible to keep frozen products cold inside a moving vehicle. And in 1920, a man named Harry Burt in Youngstown, Ohio, attached a stick to a chocolate-covered ice cream bar, called it the Good Humor Bar, and began sending out a fleet of clean white trucks driven by uniformed men. That image, the white uniform, the polished truck, the courteous driver, became the template for everything that followed. By the 1940s, and especially the 1950s, ice cream trucks were a fixture of American neighborhoods in a way that is hard to fully appreciate today. The route structure was deliberate and consistent. Drivers were assigned specific territories. They learned the streets, the schools, the timing of when children came home, when families sat out on their porches in the evening heat. They came at roughly the same time each day, give or take a few minutes, and the neighborhood knew it. Parents planned for it. Children saved for it. It became part of the daily calendar of summer, the same way the newspaper on the stoop or the whistle of the factory shift did. The trucks themselves were small worlds, step vans, often converted or custom-built, packed with a chest freezer running off a generator or block ice, stocked with maybe 30 or 40 different products. The menu was painted directly on the outside panels in bright, sun-faded colors. Popsicles for a nickel, fudge-sicles, chocolate eclair bars, toasted almond bars, push-ups, nutty buddies, strawberry shortcake bars with that crumble coating that got on your fingers and stayed there. The driver would slide open a window on the side, lean out and hand things down. He knew what the regulars liked. In a real sense, he was a neighborhood figure, not just a vendor. Children who grew up in the same house for years sometimes knew the same driver for an entire decade. The business model was straightforward, but demanding. Drivers typically leased their trucks and routes from a larger distributor. They paid for their product up front and kept the margin on sales. It was not a wealthy life, but in the post-war years, when neighborhoods were dense, summers were long, and children had a few coins in their pockets, it was a workable one. Good Humor was the dominant national brand through much of the 1950s, but regional operators and independent drivers were everywhere. The industry was loosely organized, local in character, and deeply tied to foot traffic. In the suburban boom years, that meant children pouring out of new ranch houses and brick colonials into long summer afternoons. What began to change things was not any single event. It was a slow accumulation of pressures that gathered through the 1960s and accelerated into the 1970s. The first pressure was cost. Fuel prices rose, insurance became more expensive. The profit margins on individual frozen novelties, already thin, grew even thinner as the price of everything around them climbed. Good Humor, which had operated a national fleet of uniformed drivers since the 1920s, made the decision in 1976 to shut down its street vending operation entirely. It is a significant date. Good Humor pulled its trucks off American streets and moved to selling its products through grocery stores instead. The white uniformed driver, one of the most recognized figures in American commercial life, was gone. At the same time, the supermarket freezer aisle was expanding rapidly. What had once required a truck to bring to your door could now be bought in bulk at the grocery store. Families began keeping a box of popsicles in the home freezer. The trip to the curb became less urgent when the same product was sitting 10 feet from the living room. The economics of the truck route, always fragile, could not compete with that kind of convenience. There were other factors, too. Concerns about children running into traffic to reach trucks led to local regulations in many towns. Rising crime in some cities made route driving more difficult. Air conditioning changed the rhythm of summer afternoons, pulling families indoors and away from porches and yards. The texture of neighborhood life itself began to shift. Children played outside less, families moved more often. The long, steady relationship between a driver and a neighborhood, built over years, became harder to hold together. Independent operators kept running trucks, and some still do. In many cities, the ice cream truck survived in a changed form, often serving immigrant communities or working-class neighborhoods where the outdoor summer culture and the value of a simple treat still made sense. But the trucks became more varied. The music, once hand-cranked bells, became electronic loops. The routes became less predictable. The uniformed driver gave way to anyone willing to lease a battered truck and learn a territory. The institution persisted, but it had transformed into something less consistent, less embedded in daily life, and more occasional. What was lost was not just the ice cream. That's the easy answer, and it misses the point. What was lost was a particular kind of small anticipation that belonged entirely to childhood. The feeling of waiting for something that came to you on its own schedule. The sound that meant summer was real, and the afternoon was long, and there was no reason to be anywhere but outside. The moment at the window when you had to choose, and the driver waited, and you felt the weight of a completely inconsequential decision as if it mattered enormously, because to you, in that moment, it did. Those small rituals of the mid-century neighborhood worked like a kind of social fabric. They connected people not through organized events or institutions, but through shared daily rhythms. The ice cream truck was one thread in that fabric. You didn't think about it as mattering. You thought about whether to get the creamsicle or the drumstick, but the mattering was happening anyway, quietly in the background of an ordinary American summer. If this brought something back for you, something specific, a street you grew up on, a particular bar you always chose, a driver whose name you still remember, I'd genuinely like to hear it in the comments. Those details are the ones that matter most. And if you're watching this and you never experienced it yourself, perhaps now you understand a little of what older generations are describing when they say that something is gone and they can't quite explain what it is. If you enjoyed this one, consider subscribing. There are more stories like this one waiting about the ordinary things that shaped American life and quietly disappeared before anyone thought to say goodbye.